It says in 2 Timothy, when Paul was writing to Timothy, it says in chapter 3, verse 15, "From a babe you have known the sacred writings, which are able to make you wise unto salvation." From a babe you have known the sacred writings. Our children don't know the Bible. Our children don't know it because the parents often don't know it. It's not taught in school anymore. It's not allowed to be placed in public buildings. Therefore, many people from a child never hear of the sacred writings. It's the same now as it was back in ancient Israel, because not everybody knew the sacred writings from a child. Yet it says in Proverbs that we are to train up a child in the way he should go. Then when they are old, they will not depart from it. It seems that whenever a nation becomes prosperous, they turn their back on God. The Western world has done it. And ancient Israel did it many times when they became prosperous, when they became wealthy. They turned away from God and turned to other gods. Gods of money, of pleasure, of sport, of indulgences. They turned away from what God has said. They never seemed to learn from their own history, because they were given many warnings. In Deuteronomy 11, verse 1, it says, "Therefore you shall love Jehovah your God and keep his charge, and his statutes, and his ordinances, and his commandments always." When you turn to other gods, when you turn away from Yahweh, or from Jesus, then you obviously don't keep his statutes. It says in Deuteronomy chapter 12, "These are the statutes and the ordinances which you shall observe to do in the land which Jehovah hath given you to possess all the days that you live upon the earth. And you shall destroy all the places wherein the nations that you shall dispossess served their gods, upon the mountains, upon the hills, and under every green tree." But we don't do that. We don't do that, any of that anymore. So in Deuteronomy 28 it says, "And it shall come to pass, if you hearken diligently unto the voice of God, to observe to do all his commandments, that Jehovah will set you in high above all the nations of the earth, and all blessings shall come upon you and overtake you, if you hearken unto the voice of God." It says, "Jehovah will cause your enemies that rise up against you to be smitten before you. They shall come out against you one day, and shall flee before you 7 ways." We don't find that much anymore. It says in verse 15, "But it shall come to pass, if you will not hearken unto the voice of Jehovah, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee, that all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you." And he lists a number of them, but I want to point out just a couple that are appropriate for right now. Because it says that all these curses shall come upon you and shall pursue you and overtake you till you be destroyed, if you do not hearken unto the voice of God. "Therefore you shall serve your enemies, that Jehovah shall send against you, in hunger, in thirst, and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon your neck until he has destroyed you. Jehovah will bring a nation against you from afar, from the end of the earth, as the eagle flies. You have to look at what's happening in England and in Egypt and around the world and wonder if this is what's coming true. Because none of the nations of the Western world have hearkened, have done what God commanded. The prophet Habakkuk in chapter 3 said, I have heard, this is God speaking, this is him speaking to God, I have heard your speech and was afraid. He's responding to God. A land, O Lord, revive thy work in the midst of the years. In wrath, remember mercy. There is a call then for revival. The prophet Zechariah said, if you turn back to me, then I will turn back to you. Perhaps the time has come when we should consider doing that. But revival starts with each individual. It's not just a nation. And sometimes revival can start because of some little things that happen in one's life. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be something very simple. I'll tell you the story of one person. In 1863, a Dr. W.B. Mackay was a surgeon in a hospital in England. He had been raised by a mother who loved God, who tried to teach him the scriptures, the story of salvation, and who prayed frequently for his salvation. But he wasn't interested. He turned his back. He didn't really care. Years later, when he was a surgeon in a hospital, an injured laborer came into him. This man was seriously injured and was not expected to live. He had no relatives. But all he wanted was his landlady to come to him and to bring him a book, his Bible. And Dr. Mackay said he went in to see him for a number of days, and he was impressed by this joyfulness and the resoluteness and the peace that was on his face. He said he read the Bible every day until he was unable to read it. And then he put it under his covers and slept with it. The man died. At the time when his belongings were to be sorted, the Bible was there. And someone gave it to Dr. Mackay. He opened it and was astonished because he found out that it was his own Bible. His Bible, the Bible that his mother had given him years before, the last thing she ever gave him when he left home. He had sold it for a few pennies when he was short of cash. And it had come back to him with still his mother's signature in it. That Bible led to his conversion. It was his revival. It was his way of being revived. He was also the author of the song, Revive Us Again. And it was because of that he wrote the song. We cannot fight ideology alone with guns. It has to be fought with the truth. And we can't fight it with the truth until we know the truth ourselves. Something to think about.